This bookshelf is a continuation of my bookshelf tour, which I started some time ago, but am not even close to finished completing yet, unfortunately. This shelf is another miscellaneous shelf. It has quite a bit of poetry on it, also a lot of criticism, essays, and some other random stuff. It's pretty much unorganized beyond that. But let me just show you what's on this one. And I think what I'll do is I'll just use my little pointer here as opposed to pulling out each book, because that can get a little cumbersome. There is Keats, Truth and Imagination, which is just some poems. A book of poetry by Denise Levertov called Breathing the Water. Just Enough Liebling. The Trivium by Sister Miriam Joseph. The Complete Poems of John Keats. The Collected Poems of Ted Hughes. Robert Hughes's book of art criticism called Nothing If Not Critical. Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks. John Hollander's The Work of Poetry. Love, Poverty, and War by Christopher Hitchens. The Temple, which is collected poetry by George Herbert. Ben Jonson, collected poetry and plays. The Gift by Lewis Hyde. Essays on Thomas Mann by the Hungarian-born literary critic Lukács. Collected poetry of John Milton. The Complete Essays of Montaigne. The Mad Woman in the Attic. A Literary Companion. David Lodge's Consciousness and the Novel. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's Selected Poems. The Complete Poetry of Thomas Hardy. Selected Lyrics by Edna St. Vincent Millay. Arthur Miller's Echoes Down the Corridor, which is a collection of essays. And New and Collected Poems 1931 to 2001 by Czesław Miłosz. Down here we have the 5 Decades of Poems, 1926 to 1970 by Pablo Neruda. It's kind of hidden away back there. Right here, Collected Essays of Orwell. A copy of The Metamorphosis by Ovid. Reading Lolita in Tehran. The Collected Poems of Octavio Paz. The Message in the Bottle by Walker Percy. The Writer in the World by V.S. Naipaul. Adrian Rich's What Is Found There. Get some more light. A Norton Critical edition of Adrian Rich's Poetry and Prose. Adrian Rich's The Fact of a Door Frame. The Selected Poetry of Rainer Maria Rilke. The Works of the Earl of Rochester. Richard Ruland's and Malcolm Bradbury's From Puritanism to Postmodernism. The Essential Rumi. Oliver Sacks's An Anthropologist on Mars. Oliver Sacks's The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. Oliver Sacks's Uncle Tungsten. Edward Said's Orientalism. The Colossus and Other Poems by Sylvia Plath. Reasonable Creatures, which is a collection of journalism by Katha Pollitt. Eugene Onegin by Pushkin. The Complete Poems of Kenneth Rexroth. From Oslo to Iraq and the Road Map by Edward Said. The Complete Poetry of John Milton. The Mighty Fortress, A New History of the German People by Stephen Osment. A History of Modern Poetry, I think this is volume either 1 or 2, I don't remember. And then behind that we have an edition of the Poetry of Petrarch. Okay. Next we have The Lives of the Poets by Michael Schmidt. Again, sort of hidden there. The Selected Poems of Anne Sexton. Roger Shattuck's Forbidden Knowledge, the Sonnets of Shakespeare, a book by Stephen Grant called God and Reason in the Middle Ages, a copy of Shakespeare's Macbeth, the Norton Critical Edition of Shelley's Poetry and Prose, a book of sociology by George Simmel called The Conflict in Modern Culture and Other Essays, 13 Ways of Looking at the Novel by Jane Smiley, Susan Sontag's Where the Stress Falls, George Kantorowicz's The King's Two Bodies, John Garner's On Moral Fiction, Gore Vidal's Essays, the Collected Essays, The Song of Roland, Susan Sontag's Illness as Metaphor and AIDS and Its Metaphors, Loose Cannons by Henry Louis Gates, a Susan Sontag Reader, Anthony Grafton's The Footnote, Susan Sontag's At the Same Time, Collected Essays and Speeches, Susan Sontag's Against Interpretation, Susan Sontag's, you see, losing track, toggling back and forth here. Let's see, there we go, Regarding the Pain of Others, the Collected Poems of Wallace Stevens, Witold Szymborska's With a Grain of Sand, which is a book of poetry, Nobel Prize winner, Arthur C.'s The Red Shifting Web, Rabindranath Tagore's Selected Poems, Tennyson's Selected Poems, The Fantastic, which is a book of criticism by Todorev, a book on surrealism, a long poem called Patterson by William Carlos Williams, To the Finland Station by Edmund Wilson, and a book of literary essays and reviews from the 30s and 40s, also by Edmund Wilson. There are a couple of books that are a little hidden back here. This one is called Simone Weil, just has collected essays. This is Simone Weil's Waiting for God. This is Raymond Williams's Marxism and Literature, Critical Terms for Literary Study, A Reader's Guide to Contemporary Literary Theory, Critical Introduction to Queer Theory, the Modern Library edition of Whitman's Poetry and Prose, the collected poems of William Butler Yeats, Peter Ackroyd's Albion, The Lion and the Unicorn by Richard Aldous, Anne Applebaum's Wonderful Gulag, Karen Armstrong's Holy War, Susan Wise Bauer's The History of the Ancient World, The Roman Triumph by Beard, 2 volumes of The Black Athena by Martin Bernal. This is volume 1 and 2. A Brief History of the Romans, a book called Captives by Linda Collar, the Oxford History of the Roman world and the Oxford History of Greece and the Hellenistic world. And here is, well, if I can get the light to shine on it, it's a book called Same-Sex Unions in Pre-Modern Europe by John Boswell. Okay, at the very bottom, let me see if I can get on the floor here. At the bottom we have Harold Bloom's The Invention of the Human. Then we have another book by John Boswell called The Kindness of Strangers, Charlatan by Pope Brock, Vermeer's Hat, The Body and Society by Peter Brown, Medieval Lives by Norman Cantor, The Last Night which is a book about John Gaunt by Norman Cantor. Reflections on the full title of the book. Yes, Reflections on the Revolution in France by Edmund Burke, of course. Jacob Burckhardt's The Renaissance in Italy. I apologize for the bad lighting. Life Against Death by Norman O'Brien. Sailing the Wine-Dark Seas by Thomas Cahill. Book on Julius Caesar by Cantifora. Another book by Norman Brown called Civilization in the Middle Ages. A book on judicial process in America. Champlin's biography of Nero. Ron Chernow's biography of Alexander Hamilton. Failed States by Noam Chomsky. Constantine and Eusebius by someone named Barnes, Timothy Barnes. Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond. Trickster Travels by Natalie Zeman Davis. Cassius Dio's The Roman History, The Reign of Augustus. And last but not least, lurking behind here, this is Emil Durkheim's, there we go, we'll just pull it out, Emil Durkheim's study of suicide, a study in sociology. There you go, that's all for this shelf, and I'll try to post some of the others really soon. Thanks, guys.